How is the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights preparing? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. First, I want to thank FIDA Kenya for putting this conference together. I'll begin with a brief reflection as to what happened in our 2017 elections monitoring project. I want to say that when we started the project, we had not planned actually to monitor issues to do with SGBV. But we had a very wonderful online-based system through which our monitors and also members of staff we deployed, would send reports to the system. And therefore, we started seeing some red flags that we were receiving reports on SGBV, and some of the stories were not very palatable. So together with my seniors, we agreed to embark on another project specifically to look at the issues to do with SGBV. And that's how we came up with a report titled Silhouettes of Brutality. The reason why we titled that report Silhouettes of Brutality is that, silhouette is something that is there but not very clear. And it's because when now we went to the field, we noticed that there were very serious violations that had taken place, but people were not reporting. People were not aware as to where they would send those reports, and therefore that's how we came up with that report. Very shocking statistics. The report is online. I invite you to have a look at it. And then in terms of preparation for the 2022 elections, as the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we've already started putting together the project. We've gotten some resources for the same. And therefore, what we are going to do is have monitors who we are going to train and deploy to the ground. Having learned the lesson of 2017, we have now deliberately put in our strategy the aspects of SGBV, and that is one very clear issue that we are going to reflect on. In terms of what we saw in 2017, one of the lessons we learned is that as much as there are places where you'd expect that perhaps issues to do with violations of SGBV would be more, there were other places. I want to give an example of Vihiga County. When we embarked on the project, we had not focused on Vihiga, but when we went to Kakamega, one of the survivors just called me aside and told me, it is good you've come to listen to our stories here, but just go to the neighboring county, Vihiga, and also listen to what happened there. And for sure, we had not received a single report from Vihiga. But when now, together with my team, when we went there, horrendous stories, nasty things that happened. And therefore, what we're going to do now is for 2022, even in places where you think things might be very quiet, we're also going to focus on such places. I think I want to stop, but before then, I just want to say in terms of also human rights violations, in relation to electoral processes, it is mainly as a result of mistrust of political processes and also the handling of the results and management of the same. The transmission, if there's a delay, then now people get agitated and start thinking that somebody is cooking something, and therefore then people now get in the streets and now violations occur. Thank you. I want to stop at that point for now.
Thank you, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. We hear you. We hold our thoughts. If you have any question to him, please just note it down. Let me now bring Irungu into the debate. And thanks, Irungu, for always championing issues around human rights. Happy that Amnesty is here with us. Now, in the process of violence, and specifically violence meted to women, we find that in the crossfire, innocent people get to be affected. I'm referring to the case of baby Pendo. A real young soul that really didn't need to die. And here I'm directing the question on violence, either by the police or by civilians in the process of the cycle of election. We are now ready for 2022. Irungu, do you think we have learned any lessons from Pendo? And do you think the responsible teams, IEBC, the ministry responsible for interior, have put any measures in place to avoid occurrence like what we saw in the last election cycle? Innocent Kenyans getting injured and losing their lives. Irungu, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and allow me just to live dangerously for a moment and just remove my mask just as I'm speaking. So thanks again to FIDA, to everybody. This is a wonderful convening. Leadership always happens in the context of people having powerful conversations, and I believe these 2 days are that. Very quickly, because I have 5 minutes, let me start by just saying that, saying the obvious really, is that democratic freedom or democracy is impossible in the presence of violence against women. That's not the words of an Amnesty director, that's the words of Cicely Kariuki, the former gender minister. And I think in many ways she made this, has put this really clearly for us. I think the second quote that I wanted to start off with is James Baldwin, and I'll change it slightly. And he says, "Our salvation lies in not what, our salvation lies in what we do today, not some distant future." And also, I would probably add, not some recent past. So it is important to look at 2017. It is important to look at 2008. But ultimately, we must situate ourselves in the current situation, do a proper diagnosis, and essentially develop strategies in that context. And I think the obvious point to start is really that violence, that the 2017 elections was one of the most violent elections. But nevertheless, I think it's important to be clear about where have we reached as a country in terms of the structures, and I'll come back to Baby Pendo directly in a minute. The Silhouettes of Brutality report that Kimanthi speaks to, for me, is one of the critical, historical analysis that we need to do. Something like 201 human rights violations, violence against women, 17 counties, and 56% of the incidents of violence were carried out by people in uniform. Right? So just to be very clear that we have a history that is violent, that is not a match for the Article 81 of our Constitution, which simply says that all elections must be free and fair, every vote must count, every vote must be counted, and secondly, no voter must die or be intimidated or bribed in the process. And that's really the spirit of our constitutional promise to each and every Kenyan. 4 filters that I think are really important as we approach the next elections. The first is that the legal and policy frameworks do exist. And this is one thing that is a significant shift from 2017. There are a lot of important legal frameworks, institutions, and policies that suggest that the state has essentially put in place a number of different levers that we can use. The second one is that for those of us who believe in justice, believe in freedom from violence, that we have to take a perspective around not just candidates and their security, but secondly, communities as well. So candidates and communities matter. Thirdly, that we have to, and this is uncomfortable for some of us who are feminists, myself included, is that we have to see women candidates and women not only as victims of violence, but also as perpetrators, or at least accessories to violence against other women. The fourth is an obvious one, which is that COVID-19 will be a driver, right? It will be a driver in too many different ways. The first, obviously, is that apart from the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights Study, there have been studies in the course of the COVID pandemic that suggest that psychological, emotional, sexual, and physical violence have increased in this last year or so. And this is critical for understanding what's going to happen in the elections that are coming up. Now, having said all of that, context is decisive. We are still just under 1 year from the elections. Many things could change. Many things will change. So let me just draw out very quickly in the last 2-3 minutes of the time that I have. The first is if I can focus on three major actors in terms of the elections and how do we get them ready for the electoral process. The first is political parties. The second is the criminal justice system and the state. And the third is non-state actors. And I include there also journalists and media associations, critical like Amwick. In terms of political parties, I think one of the things that we must be demanding across the political parties, not in any particular order, is that there needs to be conflict officers appointed and trained on how to deal with gender-based violence, if not violence more broadly. The second is that there has to be capacities built at the various levels of our 6-tier electoral system to be able to do risk assessments, and that political parties have as much responsibility as other non-state actors to ensure that the electoral game, if I can put it that way, the electoral context is kept within the spirit of Article 81. The third area is de-escalation strategies. Much of the violence that we see can be de-escalated. It can be de-escalated within the party structure. I do believe that the Electoral Commission, particularly in the recent by-elections, have developed a sophisticated way of dealing with cases where police officers are partisan. And I just want to acknowledge the leadership that has come out in this process, even as we wait for the new electoral commissioners to take place. But the Electoral Commission has begun to think about alternative de-escalation strategies around the elections. Fourthly, codes of conduct. No candidate should survive in the context of a primary if they are seen to be either actively inciting or carrying out violence. There are cases of elected officials, even more recently, slapping people in public, and I think that has to be a party disciplinary matter. It can't be left to only the state. Obviously, I think funding will be an issue, so women candidate funds within the political parties would be an obvious place to go. And I think I would urge those people who really want women to be very vibrantly involved in the next elections to really look at the campaign financing rules, particularly with the eye to the study that's been done by Mzalendo, and the two studies, Mzalendo's study and the study that's been done by Transparency International in the last 2 weeks, and look at the figure 22.8 million very closely. 22.8 million shillings is what it is estimated for women representatives to win an election. That figure is 4 million shillings more than the average member of parliament, right? And I think the question that I would ask is, why is it that this is cost? Now, the obvious reason is that the constituency is much bigger for a women representative. But the fact of the matter is, if you do not control the cap or the ceiling that people are going to use to campaign, it will lock out tens and hundreds of thousands of women that would be thinking of running in the elections. Let me turn, I think I've got 1 more minute, so I'm going to have to move a bit quicker. On the criminal justice system, very quickly, 5 things. Results, we must demand rights-based public order management from the Inspector General and the National Police Service. We must demand that officers be retrained rather than from an aggressive warrior mindset, but a public guardian mindset. They must also have de-escalation strategies at the level. So commanding officers, as we saw in Kianjakoma, still do not have the capacities to reduce public tension and public outrage when their officers misbehave and commit criminal acts. Diversity matters, not just age, gender, but also ethnicity, and we must demand that the deployment of officers during by-elections and elections is diverse. Mental health is a pretty important issue at the moment among the service. Not only are we seeing sexual and gender-based violence and intimate spouse violence within the police service
You
and
have
their
1
families.
minute.
I know it was coming. Let me come back to Baby Pendo, and not just Baby Pendo, but the 201 incidents of violence, including Samantha in, I think it was Madare. Many of these cases have not received their day in court. Many of them have not seen prosecutions. We have to demand of the Director of Public Prosecutions that 4 years is too long to wait for commanding officers in the case of Baby Pendo to be arraigned before court and charged with criminal neglect, or even worse, positive encouragement of violent actions. Now, there are some good things that I think we can leverage in the context of the next elections. We have seen a number of gender desks opened up across the police service. We have seen a number of shelters opened up across the country. We have the possibility of new Kenya National Commission for Human Rights Commissioner leadership. Thankfully, this is being brought very late in the day. It's almost like the powers that be see the Kenya National Commission really as an electoral accessory rather than something that an institution that is important for the country throughout. But it is important that's happening, and it is critical that we get good feminist leadership in the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights so that this issue can be taken up. Two last points. We have a number of opportunities, I think, as non-state actors, and I think as Amnesty we will be looking at our responsibility within this context towards the elections. The first is really how do we train monitors and violence interrupters. Violence interrupters are probably more important than monitors. You need monitoring information, but actually what's important is that within 30 minutes of a hotspot, and let me just say that the hotspots are not clear yet. Anybody who's trying to do conflict mapping in August 2021 is probably engaged in an exercise that is interesting, but that will not be very relevant for the elections. We need to do conflict mapping in December, and we need to do it again in March, once the civil servants particularly and the primaries have begun in full earnest. So I think that would be probably how I would end, perhaps even maybe with the violence interrupters. One of the studies, the Silhouettes of Brutality study, demonstrated for me that home-based support is critical, that women did not feel confident or safe to leave their homes to seek P3 forms, to seek redress, to seek monitors. I think we have to have the capacity in the next elections that within, let's say, 5 kilometers of every household, there are people who can go to take statements. If there are not people who can take statements, then there are people who can cause others to make statements, to take statements as quickly as possible. I apologize. I know I have gone slightly over, but I hope it's useful.
Yeah, it's very useful. Thanks. Let's put our hands together for Irungu. Now, let me bring in the duty bearer, IBC. All eyes are set to see how prepared you are. And one thing, just let us understand as Kenyans what role you have in civic education and voter education. What is the role you have as IBC in civic education and voter education? Are those your roles? How well prepared are you? Number one. And number two, on the violence that is meted against civilians, against women, violence against women, what measures have been put in place to track down and sanction, especially the candidates? Because I think, as Irungu says, the law is very clear, but we rarely get to see any sanctions that are serious enough, I believe, to tell one candidate that you cannot run. Is it that IBC do not see this violence? Do you have machineries? Because the monitoring reports will tell us there was this violence. And clearly, as Kenyans, we can pinpoint and know who is behind the violence. But we have not seen those strong sanctions to candidates coming from IBC. So those are your two questions, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I Allow me to respond on our role in as far as civic and voter education is concerned. There is always a thin line between civic education and voter education. Civic education is wider, involves how to participate as a good citizen. For example, in civic education, you teach about constitutionalism, about citizen rights, about concerned, and even quality. That is what voter education is concerned. IBC is very clear in Article 88, 4G. That is where the mandate for the Commission to conduct voter education is embedded, and it's supposed to conduct voter education continuously around the electoral cycle, because our activities are based on electoral cycle, and electoral cycle is made up of phases. The first phase in the electoral cycle is pre-election period. That's where we are now. And that is where the planning is done, and that is where the budgeting is done. And this is when we pull resources together to plan for an election, and even to do information around the plans made by the Commission. So after we've done with the first phase, which is the pre-election period, we enter into the election period. That's when, after the nomination and the campaign electoral laws come into force during that time, the nomination, the political party primaries, the nominations as we move to the general election. And then the last phase in that cycle is the post-election period, where we do some reviews and see what has been done and what worked and what did not work. So it's a reflection time. Around the violence and the sanctions around the candidates, allow me to say that the Commission has really noted an increase in incidents of violence and insecurity during the election period. And there are many things that we have put in place to ensure that this particular issue we are talking about, the sanctions on violence and gender-based violence that come around election period, is really curtailed. And one of them is legal and regulatory framework, especially the policies that we have put in place. There is IBC Gender and Social Inclusion Policy, where the Commission has really pronounced itself on what to do when violence happens. And we are also putting in place administrative mechanisms to ensure that the 2/3 gender rule principle is realized in every process, be it a political party process, be it the candidates selection process, and so forth. We have also going to work with political party liaison committee to ensure that there is compliance with this 2/3 gender rule. There will be continuous touchdowns with both investigative and prosecution institutions on stemming incidents of electoral-related violence, as evidenced by what the steps the Commission took during the recent by-elections in Juja, in Matungu, and in Kabuchai. And the Commission is very keen in seeing that there is peace for every candidate and for every Kenyan as a voter to participate in a free and fair election. We have come up with electoral risk mapping tool, where we shall be employing this tool to map up the hot areas, especially in collaboration with organizations that work with security in this country. And following that, we are planning a workshop where all key stakeholders around security agencies in this country will be congregating in Mombasa on the second week of September to discuss issues around electoral security assistance program, ASAP, and I hope to meet most of you here, seated here in that workshop, to discuss on around where we should be going as far as assuring Kenyans, assuring candidates that the field will be very safe for everybody to participate in. The Commission is keen also in enforcing electoral code of conduct, especially during the campaign period, because that is when the electoral code of conduct takes effect. And we are keen in enforcing this particular code of conduct and ensuring that the bad elements that disturb the peace in this country are dealt with as per the law. We also have a supportive system called the Code of Conduct Enforcement Committee. And most of the stakeholders who play in this field are also members of this committee to penalize candidates and political parties that perpetrate electoral malpractices and violence, intimidation, discrimination, and destruction of campaign materials, especially for other opposing candidates. Thank you so much. And we shall be regularizing these meetings where we shall sit down and meet these particular stakeholders to discuss on how best we can handle these situations. We are also going to establish women situation rooms, especially as we move towards the general election, where issues on election gender-based violence will be flagged out and dealt with as soon as possible. And those are the mechanisms the Commission is putting in place to ensure that all candidates, especially women, participate with a lot of ease in tendering their candidature and even acting as voters in this forthcoming general election. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that, the insights. I believe the partners in the room working with IBC have been part of that process. Now, finally, to you, Felix, I want to look at accountability. And in the circle of accountability, at the tail end is remedy in terms of violations. But let me focus on the electoral preparedness in the country towards 2022. We seem to have had a lot of efforts put in the BBI process, and we knew that there would be changes. But we all know that with the current, the status quo, there is no way we will have much changes come 2022. But even if we do, it might be too late in time. Remembering Kriegler's report in terms of preparedness towards election, we still do not have IBC fully constituted. And we know that there are challenges in terms of political parties, preparedness towards the election on meeting the 2/3 gender rule. Katiba Institute gave us a very good decision, which is to take effect in 2022. I do not know from where I sit if any of those aspects have been taken into account. I also believe in terms of what IBC has outlined, as civil society organizations with the mandate of accountability, that the rights holders are well prepared to hold IBC and other machineries accountable. Felix, are we ready as a country for 2022 elections? If not, what do we need to do? And what can civil society do?
Thank you very much.
It's quite loaded. I'll give you 7 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much. And first of all, let me begin by joining my colleague to congratulate FIDE for organizing this meeting. I think it's extremely useful coming a year into the electioneering period. Yes, the questions are loaded, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. I think the starting point is that to say that some times back, the African Union contracted a few of us working with the AU Political Affairs Division to try and come up with an answer to a recurrent puzzle in this continent, that 30 plus years since the restoration of multi-party democracy in Africa, the continent was still unable to hold elections that met the credibility threshold. And out of that study, one of the things that has emerged that continue to bedevil our election process, but also that touches into the question of preparedness, is a phenomenon that we call, or that has emerged as, inconclusive electoral cycle. Simply put, this continent holds elections that bring serious challenges and shortcomings. The challenges are not addressed and are subsequently imported to the next election. Questions of women political participation, for those of us who have been part of this process since the 90s, will agree with me that in 97, 2002, 2007 elections, we were talking about how to mainstream women political participation. So I think the test to the preparedness is this: if elections were to be held today, would this country sufficiently say or state without any fear of contradiction that we are ready? And if you stretch that question further, between in this electoral cycle, 2017 to 2022, and with one election expected to be held in under 1 year, are we ready as a country? And I can say without any fear of contradiction that the answer to that question is no. And that does not mean by any chance to belittle what, for example, the IEBC has been doing, including developing elections operations plan and things like that. Now, the converse to that question is this: what do we need to do between now and 2022, and in light of the failure of the collapse of the BBI process, to secure a credible process? This country would have to, as a matter of urgency, entertain a discussion involving all the stakeholders, including IEBC, in considering what I call minimum electoral reforms. Simply put, these are elections, or these are reforms that are absolutely necessary to be undertaken between now and 2022 to, at the very least, secure a credible process. So the first, under this, and they are probably I'll just talk about 4. One is, as a matter of urgency, we must address the question of election management and administration. Put differently, election management body or IEBC, so to speak. 2022 will be the 7th multi-party election since the restoration of multi-party politics in 1991. And in the last 6 multi-party elections, the structure, composition, and outlook of Electoral Commission has changed 6 times. We have held 6 elections, and we have changed IEBC or the Electoral Commission 6 times. And right now we're in the process of recruiting new commissioners, and that means potentially a new outlook will manage the 2022 elections. Chesoni Commission, Kifuitu Commission, IPPG Commission, IIC, Amedizaka IEBC, and now Chebukati IEBC. Those are 6 commissions, or 6 different commissions. Now, thank God, the process of filling the vacancies is almost done, but there would have to be a serious conversation in addressing the question of the relationship between the commission and the secretariat, but also to energize and build the capacity of the secretariat, both at the national level, but most fundamentally, the so-called CEC. We have seen in 2013 and 2017, the CEOs of IEBCs unilaterally make a decision to change and reshuffle the constituency coordinators. I'm telling you, the electoral malpractice in this continent now happens at the constituency level. And so that unilateral decision of reshuffling the commission should not happen. The second, and very quickly, is the question the country must have for us to be prepared. Then we must complete the legislative reforms or the electoral reforms. Now, in countries that are undergoing what I call the inconclusive electoral cycle, reforms are either skewed or they outrightly stalled. The Election Security Amendment Bill of 2617, otherwise called the Duale Amendment, is an example of a skewed electoral reforms. Now, the conduct of the 10th, 11th Parliament has been that we initiate electoral reforms literally all the way up to the election date. And that causes serious implication on preparations and crucial timelines in the elections. So the country must move with speed to resolve the issue of electoral sector law reforms. Party nomination has been alluded to by my colleagues here, and Joyce in particular. Now, this is tied also to a very important agenda for this meeting, or FIDA's interest in organizations that support women political participation. In every election since '92, the party nomination has been held in a manner that disadvantages especially women candidates. And every election, including the 202, which was generally free and fair, party nomination presented very serious challenges. Connected to the party nomination is how political parties deal with the so-called party lists. And again, here there are more than ample example, if we had time, how women have been disadvantaged in the composition of the party list, which is an exclusive affair of the so-called party leadership. The other issue that this country must have an honest conversation is the question of integration of technology in the electoral process. In 2017, the Orengo Kiraitu bipartisan committee came up with KIMS. Now, in every election since 2013, the utility of technology in the electoral process has been an issue. Technology seems to be regarded by the Electoral Commission as only necessary to enhance efficiency and speed, and has nothing to do with transparency and accountability. The KIMS kits, the servers have not been opened up to now. And you remember that was a major issue. Now, there has to be an honest conversation on the kind of technology we'll use in 2022, and that discussion must incorporate the twin objectives of election technology, which is to enhance efficiency and speed, but also transparency and accountability on the other hand. And I think this is something that the IEBC chose to go about because there's a tender of technology that is out. If the 2017 process was a bipartisan, all-inclusive process, then as a matter of necessity, IEBC should involve all, especially the political players, in determining the kind of technology that we will use in 2022 elections. And finally, the question of results management system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the elephant in the room. In 2007, 2013, and 2017, the manner in which the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission handled the results was a big deal. Results management system simply means the process of counting, tabulation, transmission, and declaration of results. And in this regard, in every election in this continent, but more so in this country, this is where we've had problems. Remember, the invalidation of the presidential elections on the basis of illegalities and irregularities was on the basis of results transmission. And so serious reforms are required in this regard. And one of those reforms is integration of technology, but as a matter of necessity, the media must be allowed to transmit and play a part in the results transmission without generating or coming up with their own results. This was the case in 2002 elections, where President Kibaki was confirmed as having been elected president on the basis of the media results. And this is what routinely happens in the United States, where CNN and so on and so forth declare results. Thank you very much, and I apologize for taking time.
Thank you, Felix, and really taking the accountability role very, very seriously. We've heard from the panel quite interesting debate in terms of preparedness. We are now having the countdown to 2022 election. Now I want to invite any comments or questions, quick ones. So among the teams outside, we just have one question per team. Let me begin from the members in the room. Anybody with a question to the panel? And please, when you're asking, oh, sorry, my apologies. I missed out a very, very key guest, sorry. My apologies, Judy. So, Judy, I have a question for you. Sorry, so Judy, we are still looking at accountability from a civil society point of view. We have had IBC giving us a rundown of activities that they have put in place. So one question in terms of media and its role, has AMWIC been involved in those processes? And if so, are you confident that, just taking up from where Felix has left, that the media has been actively engaged so that in terms of transmission, in terms of reporting, that we have fair reporting in terms of the happenings, in terms of the processes, because we know whatever reports that come out from media can make or break the process. Over to you. You have 5 minutes.
I don't.
Is it on? Could we have a sanitized one that is working?
Oh, it's not. I think it's on now. It's fine now.
Okay.
So thank you very much. Thanks to FIDA first for organizing this, and also thanks to FIDA for recognizing the role of the media in reporting on gender. I'm happy that I'm one of the recipients as a journalist for reporting on gender while I was working as a journalist at Capital FM. So continue doing the good work. One of the things that I must say is that the role of the media is very important, and considering that they are the conveyors of information, and that the people with the platform, you know, they can be able to reach all parts of the country, whether it's mainstream media, the local media, the community media, vernacular radio stations. There's a lot of power in that, in fact, that they have to pass that information. So one of the things that I know is that we've been very involved, especially as AMWIC. We already started our first engagement as AMWIC in Mombasa, where we met with the IBC to discuss the role of the media and the kind of information that will be required. A second process that is going on, and a very important one, is that we are reviewing the electoral reporting guidelines that we used in 2013 and 2017. And AMWIC is part of that process. It's ongoing, and it's multi-sectoral. It's being led by the Media Council of Kenya. The second one is the Kenya Sector Media Working Group. We've already started discussing how we are going to have the presidential debates, but it's a bit too early considering that looking at the way things are up to now, we are really not sure what is going to happen. But preparations have already started very early. At AMWIC, we are doing a lot of training to train the journalists on gender-sensitive reporting. Like you realize, especially among the FM stations, the stereotypes, you know, all those things that are missing the importance of the women in the electoral process are still quite a big issue. So we are doing a lot of training for journalists, and one of the things that I would urge the partners here today is to support this training, because reporting on gender is not easy. It requires proper reporting that we get from the superficial kind of reporting that is, that Woye situation of all women are always facing challenges, but how do we try and train journalists to link up gender issues to the human rights, the rights media part of it. So it's not just a training where the journalists meet and just talk for a day and go, no, but it's practical reporting, and based also on my background as a journalist, at Amwik we are more than willing to work with partners that we have proper training that is really practical and that we can use in the newsrooms. Another thing that we really want to do at Amwik is to ensure that we have champions in the newsroom. Anybody who reports on gender in the newsroom, they know the kind of bashing that goes on. You are branded as a feminist, you are rewarded as an activist. All of us reporting on human rights, on gender issues in the newsroom, they know what happens in the newsroom. So we really need to push and have strong people in the newsroom. It doesn't matter whether they are women or men, but we really need to have champions in the newsrooms who can fight at the editorial meeting and say, these issues have to be prioritized, because in the newsroom it gets to where, give this one to her, she reports on those people. Those are now issues on women. So we have to really fight right in the newsrooms to ensure that these things are considered as important news items, important issues that need to be discussed. And secondly, if we look at the coverage of women as news sources, where women are considered as news sources, it's quite low. We are at 30%, meaning that whenever we interview a woman, like very few of them are considered as important news sources. And according to that research, then it needs to have a lot of work to do to ensure that women are being considered as news sources. As we move closer to elections, how do we empower the journalists to ensure they are able to pick up and ask, gender-sensitive questions? Because, like, for example, why would you ask a female governor, how will she balance her work and family, and not ask the same question to the male governor? So the training really requires really robust kind of training, and we have experts who can be able to do that. So as we think about it, let us think of how we are going to empower the journalists. At the same time, we also want to create a platform for female political candidates to show them how to engage the media effectively and constructively. And this requires engagement between the civil society groups, the media, as well as the female political aspirants. So I see so many areas that we can partner with, but meanwhile, these processes are going on. I've already sent my views regarding reporting on gender. At the same time, the responsibility of the media, because some media are already taking sides and deciding which political side they will be supporting. But what about the security of the journalists working for those media houses? So at the same time, let us pay attention to the also plight of the journalists, ensure we support them, whether it's coming up with awards, whether it's recognizing them, whether it's encouraging them. But I can say, having come from that industry and now from the Amwik the point of view, media really needs to be supported and equipped with the skills, the knowledge, and even encouraged to continue, because it's not an easy task if you look at the condition or the environment that the journalist is working in today. Thank you.
Judy, just hold your mic. Accountability is two-way. The women media survey, are they ready? Because what is your experience? When I was in the office of the chair of the National Gender and Equality Commission, I'd get the media houses providing space for women to come and debate. But you would hardly find women willing and ready to come. I know, like, NTV would be calling you to be on the air at 6 a.m. Are women ready? Because I think we are thinking preparedness. What can we do differently? Can we get women committing that when the spaces are availed by Amwik, they will be there to come and really debate the issues?
Unfortunately, women are not ready. I'm speaking also from experience as a journalist. You just walk on the streets and you ask somebody, what do you think about the two-thirds gender rule? Yeah, don't talk about those issues. So women keep on running away. The shows are there. You invite them, come to the studio. It's excuse after excuse. So sometimes even the presenters are really grappling with that. They've already raised that as a problem and a challenge, that they're not always finding the women ready. But I think for the first time, I've seen a lot of improvement. We've seen more women actually run for seats that are considered as only for the men. And we've seen some women actually take up the social media space to really, sell their manifestos, sell their candidacy. So I think I see a bit of the difference. And that's why I think we need to also to move to the, the local levels, the counties, and start encouraging women to start coming out. Because a lot of times they don't want to come out, but I think they just need to be trained, interviewing skills, how do you conduct a TV interview, How do you respond to difficult questions? Actually, I have done it through different forums, and even at TAMWIC, this is what we want to do, to train them that they're empowered, that they feel confident to speak. Because not that they don't want to speak, but I think some of them are not experienced, and being on TV for the first time, or using a microphone for the first time isn't easy. But if we can come together and assure that we move from county to county, train the women, empower them, and even do practical examples of how do you appear for that media interview. We've done it, and actually we've seen the people who have never spoken speak. So we really have a lot to do to encourage them and empower them to feel confident enough to go on TV, go on radio, talk to journalists, and also fight this feeling of I don't talk to journalists. Because another thing that journalists suffer from is that people fear them. They don't even consider them as human beings. Also the mindset has to change. Yep. And for that to change, then we need to come together on the same table. We discuss, what don't you like about the media? And the media has been doing that. You've seen what even Kenya Editors Guild is doing. They've been moving from place to place, having the meetings for people to say, what don't you like about the media? And so if we can have that forum, I think we are going to improve these relationships, and we'll make it a safe space where women can come out and speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's put our hands together for the panel. And now it's time to invite questions. I will give the people in the room an opportunity to ask one question. And in all the satellite places, we only will allow one question because of time. And please just ask the question. Don't give us stories. We have heard already from the panel. And if your question is directed to any panelist, please tell us who you are directing your question to. So let's begin with the people in the room. Any question for? No. So can I know which center is ready? Meru, you have the floor. So the panel, please just take the questions. We'll get one round to do the response. Meru?
Thank you. My question goes to the journalist, the lady who discussed about the journalist. Is that when you call them or when they call you for any questioning, later on you are told to pay when you are not even prepared. What did you say about that? Thank you very much.
Judy, you got the question? Yes. Okay. Next center? Nakuru?
Kisumu.
Nakuru?
Kisumu.
Okay, Kisumu, you're ready? You're on the floor.
Kisumu, my name is Caroline Ogot from Kisumu. I want to address Irungu, Felix, and even Amwick. We are talking about the processes involved on women, with women. The security of a woman, the media reporting of a woman or involvement, the justice takes all year round. What women need, I have contested and I know that what women need is consistency and continuity. Need to have all these bodies represented to be talking about our issues all year long throughout the 5 years so that we do not just wait towards the end. Civic education should be done in safe spaces, in languages understood. You give it to the women as if you are talking to a child who is in nursery school. We need continuity and consistency in civic education, in protection, so that we do not just wait towards the end like now. A woman is a very fragile body that anything that even
Kisumu,
shakes her neighbor
thank you,
or even
Kisumu.
herself
We have had your question.
does not work well with us.
Thank you, Kisumu. The question is well noted. Next center. Bungoma, you have the floor.
Yes, my name is Leah Sia from West Pokot and director of the Women Rights Organization. My question is, we've heard you talk about what you're going to do in preparedness. Joyce also mentioned about stakeholders being taken to Mombasa for a meeting, but then I have a thought about this. This violence comes from the top big politicians in the country. What have you done to target the big three people in the country so that when they talk nice things that don't influence people into violence? please target them.
Thank you. Nairobi? We can't hear. You are muted. I think.
I'm asking how prepared are they to sensitize the community at the location levels on how to report the cases of human violence, because when they go immediately when the elections are done, they are just people who are just there and nobody knows them. So it is good if they could go to the community and sensitize them on issues of reporting on violence which are occurring during elections.
We didn't get your question from the beginning. Who are you addressing it to? And reframe it again.
To Lucas.
Okay, Lucas. Okay. You got a question, Lucas? Okay. Thank you. Any other center? No. Any other listener on the? No. Okay, so I will. Somebody has a question in the room? Yes, please. A bit louder. My name is Terry. Yes. My question goes to Judy. Oh, Judy. I think there is need to work with media houses for that to become agenda policy. Just a minute, they're getting the mic to you because we need it to go through the system.
Sorry for that. My name is Terry Nzau Mbaito FM, and my question goes to Judy Kaberia or my comment. There is need to have a gender policy in the media houses so that we may increase the women participation even in the way we cover news. As you asked to Judy Kaberia about the issue of women being contacted to come to radio stations or TV stations and them not showing up, we need to sensitize them and explain to them the need of them showing up in those debates, because they say power is grabbed, it is not brought to you. So the women need to grab the power to where they are. So they need to understand the real importance of them coming to those media houses and also how they can articulate these issues. For example, 2017 and 2013, I was doing a project with the UN Women. I was hosting women aspirants. And most of the time, you could ask them about some questions, then they tell you, kindly Terry, send me questions prior. I cannot send you questions prior. I will tell you definitely that. You need to be equipped. So we need to emphasize that, and as civil society organizations and other stakeholders, try to explain to them to come clearly as to why.
Okay, so I hear you saying that the women vying must be prepared. They must know their information.
Yes, and FIDA and other organizations come up with policy, help media houses to come up with a policy so that when I cover a story, it is balanced. There's a voice for a woman and there's a voice for a man.
Okay, so Judy, that is for you. So any other question? I think, yes. Nakuru, I'm told now online, or they've sent it? Nakuru, are they online? Nakuru, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, one question.
My name is Priscilla from
Nakuru, you will have to begin your question again.
My question goes to IBC, IOS, on preparedness towards election. You've spoken of on election cycle. Is this period you talked of pre-election period? This period should start when? I feel this is the period that can lead us to no violence during election if it's done properly. But recently, we've seen the IBC have been only 3 commissioners. It was only recent that the pattern commission were killed. Have they been fully prepared towards this period? And when does this period begin? Another question towards IBC is women's situation room. Is it going to be established in all counties or in IBC structures? Another question also still goes to IBC, confirming to us, are you ready for this election come 2022? And party nominations process have no proper rules and security for position, especially for people with disabilities and women? What are the plans that you have in place to solve this situation?
Thank you. Thank you, Nakuru. And last question from our online participants. How can our male youth be involved to prevent violence against women during election? How can our male youth be involved to prevent violence against women during election? So you each will have 2 minutes. There are questions that may have been directed to you directly or a comment, and as you do so, please also give us your parting shot in terms of the preparedness. What would you want to see? So I can begin here, Kimanthi, and we go around, we will end with Irungu, and you each just have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. On the question of engaging with the communities at the lowest location, ward, constituency level, the strength of Kenya National Commission on Human Rights lies on the part of the monitors who, starting early next year, we are going to recruit, take them through some intensive training, and then deploy them to the wards and constituency levels. So through that, we'll be able to get the reports. The other thing is, between now and October, we are going to have some trainings at the community levels for HRDs, who we also expect will be sharing reports with us. Then we also going to have a platform, an online platform, which will include free SMS, toll-free line, through which we can also get reports from the communities. And also, we are also going to engage the media and, pass information, highlighting, the toll-free line, the SMS platform, so that we can engage with the communities. My parting shot is based on the statistics from our 2017 SGBV report titled Silhouettes of Brutality, that out of all the violations, we did 4 reports, starting with the party primaries up to the SGBV report. Of all the violations that we got information, 25.17 of the total violations within the 4 reports is on SGBV. So what does that tell us? Again, 52.6 of the total cases on SGBV was gang rape, and therefore, for me, we need to reflect that if we can have 25.17 of the total cases within the electoral cycle, being SGBV, and having now these other scary statistics, gang rape and all that, what does that portend for us? Thank you. I want to stop.
Thank you. That is quite worrisome. And we are told statistics don't lie, so we really need to come round the table and find a solution. Yes, Judy?
My answer is to the lady from Meru County. If a journalist is asking for a bribe, that's not a journalist, that's a thief, that's a conman. Journalists are supposed to be ethical, do their work without expecting any money. If a journalist asks for money, then the day you don't have money, you'll not get covered, or they'll just do the story for the sake of doing the story. And if you don't give them the money, next time they'll tell you, I am going to destroy you. So we have incidences. It's one of the challenges that I must admit. Corruption in the media is a crisis, and it needs to be addressed. And we've been discussing this at the industry level, but I know we really have challenges. And these challenges include, why is the government of Kenya giving media houses or people to start media houses when they know they cannot pay the journalists, when they know they're just telling you, go and find how you come back. You go and find out who can give you transport. So if the governor gives you transport, how are you supposed to say the governor is corrupt when is taken before the EACC? So I think even the law has to be changed for anybody who wants to begin a media house in this Kenya, that they have to observe the rights of the people who are working for them. We have journalists in this country working without contracts, working just like, you know, the way you go to a construction site and work and come back. So those issues must be addressed at the policy level. But that does not mean that we have journalists who are well paid not being corrupt. It is true, it's a sickness in the media, and this really has to be addressed, and it goes back to the media houses, and that's why we have to continue talking about the rot. We investigate ourselves internally and ask if we are really ethical and if we are really, you know, dedicated to the work that we do. And actually you can report. If you find a journalist asking for money, we've had media houses fire people. So please feel free to get in touch with the media house, make a phone call and say, this journalist works for you and ask for money for me. Actually, media houses are firing them. For Kisumu, about reporting on women, and this is what we are talking about, us coming together to train journalists to ensure that in every media house in Kenya we have a champion who can be able to look at the gender part of it, look at women, and we've looked at the challenge that we have. Women are only at 30% considered as news sources. So this is quite low, and this is why we are talking about more training for the journalists. And then to Terry, yes, we've been working with media houses to ensure that they develop gender policies, including internal policies on even sexual harassment. We're just now developing a redress mechanism where also the messenger can actually, you know, have some of these challenges addressed, because the media reports about other people, but inside they're also suffering. And even when you look at representation of the media at the decision-making table, it's again led by men at 35%. So again, how do we ensure even women are rising to the high level so that they can make decisions about the content of the day that should be running? So these are some of the things that we are addressing.
Your parting shot, Judy?
Yes, now my parting shot is, yes, we need to come together, empower the journalists, and do the training in 3 levels. The media managers, that include the media owners, for them actually to walk the talk, not just saying we are doing this, but they're not doing this. So we need to have all those training for the media owners and the journalists, the editors as well, because if you train the journalist and the editor who is supposed to say this story should run or this story should not run, then we'll be having still the same problems that we have. So, as journalists go reporting in elections, they must be protected. Journalists are suffering in silence. There's a lot of censorship at individual level. The law is very clear, but the kind of censorship that is happening now is where I pick a phone call and say, I don't like what you are doing, which is even more intimidating. So these are some of the things that actually we need to think of. How do we protect journalists? How do we come together as different organizations to speak about the freedom of the media in this country? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Felix.
Thank you very much. Very briefly, let me talk about election security. And first of all, I'm encouraged to note that IEBC will be convening a multi-sectoral workshop in Mombasa to deal with electoral security. And I want to persuade, first of all, it has to be understood that there are 2 segments to electoral security. Number 1 is what IEBC will be doing with electoral security agencies, and that is on the maintenance of law and order. In this country, in election period, the criminal justice system that Irungu spoke about, or the penal code, seems to be suspended. Everybody understands that if a woman candidate is assaulted in the course of an election, that is easily explainable as alipigwa wakati wa uchaguzi. And that should not be the case. So the security agencies should actually tighten this. But to protect women candidates, IEBC must enforce the election code of conduct, both to the perpetrators of electoral violence, but to those who assault IEBC officers. I think all of you recall the by-election, was it this constituency in Western, the recent by-election, Matungu constituency, where all the media houses carried stories to the effect that an IEBC presiding officer was assaulted, and IEBC ought to have invoked the electoral code of conduct, so that is necessary. But there's another thing to it, which can only be done by IEBC, the security of the ballot. It is not just about question of a maintenance of law and order. The security of the ballot is, for example, what triggered the 2007 post-election violence. And that can only be done by IEBC, so I hope the Mombasa meeting will incorporate the security of the ballot as well. Then the state of readiness. I think IBC has done a lot, has tried to do, under the circumstances, a lack of funding and things like that. And that is tied to the parting shot. To secure a credible 2022 elections does not entirely rest on IEBC alone. IEBC will have to do its part and should do its part, and indeed they are the main stakeholders. But political parties would have to be ready to conduct credible nominations. Treasury would have to be ready to release funding. Parliament would have to move fast to enact electoral reforms. And the only electoral institution that seems to be ready is actually the judiciary. This is based continuously on consistency in handling electoral disputes, but also what they are now doing as we move forward. So it's a responsibility for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Felix. I will skip Joyce. Joyce, you will have the last word as the duty bearer so that you are able to comment on all. Irungu, accountability is about people, clearly, and the people are ready and willing to participate in the election. Take the questions that have been directed to you and then give us your parting shot as well.
So I take the comment that has been raised really about, how do we prepare the electorate? And I think there are three things that probably I'm present to. One is that there are too many young people who still don't have voters' cards. 5 million also, we've not spoken about them. I don't know how many of them are women. I can assume that quite a few of them will be women. So really accelerating their access to justice, to be able to exercise their right to vote. Would be one thought. The second one is really, what we have found in Amnesty is that, both education and enforcement are two sides of one coin. That it's actually really important to make clear to people what the law states, what is an ethical, what is ethical in a particular space, and how can people exercise their rights in a non-violent way. So I think the first thing is, really thinking about these next few months as an opportunity to start that education process, and what tools are we going to use, and how do we generate those tools in a way in which we don't have to physically visit different parts of the country, but they are downloadable, they are accessible to people. But the second issue is really, how do you get the system of enforcement much more, what you call muscular and able to respond quickly to cases. And obviously the most egregious human rights violations are the ones that involve people with power, right? So we have to build a system of enforcement around people who abuse their power or abuse their office to do that. I'm curious a little bit about the NCAJ, the National Council of Administration of Justice, and I'm not sure whether there has been discussions yet around the elections, but that may be another area we'd need to work on. Two last points. One is safety training. I think pre-primary, primaries would be critical. And then the other one is, what do people do in cases of violence? And I think both the media, the Kenya National Commission for Human Rights, and various agencies, the more that they can provide toll-free lines, the more they can provide rapid response mechanisms, the more confidence we'll have in being able to keep people safe. The last point is this one. Is we have to recognize that a lot of the psychological violence, a lot of the violence will be psychological, and it will be digital. Online trolling, I think, Amwik, you've done a good study in terms of 4 or 5 cases of politicians recently, women politicians who were attacked on the media, on social media, and I think we need to look at that a bit more seriously. Some of the figures that I remember looking at this recently. So we have 10 million social media users at the moment, 7 million unique users. 50% of the people who are on Twitter in Kenya are anonymous, right? Which means that you cannot trace them to a human being. Therefore, you cannot prosecute somebody. A lot of what we're seeing at the moment, even in the course of this morning, is trends that are ethnic, that are cancel culture based, or are intimidatory in the nature in which they are being framed. And I think we need to get better at interrupting those conversations, not only in terms of dealing with the ones that are inciting people, but those ones that are disinforming, or misinforming, and those that are simply just generating a sense of vices rather than virtues in the electoral process. Thank you.
Thank you, Rungu. And now over to you, Joyce. Of course, you've had everybody around. We all mean well. We all want to have a credible election that is free and fair. We now facing you as the duty bearer in accountability language. We shall monitor what you're doing. We shall ask that you review some of the aspects that we are bringing here. There will be the aspect of you acting effectively in terms of the recommendations. But you cannot have accountability at the tail end without remedy. So we are hoping that the system can allow people to get redress in terms of the aspects that we expect that may not go well. Please respond to the questions addressed to you in a very brief way and give us your assurance in terms of preparedness as your parting shot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would want to respond to issues raised by the good lady from Nakuru. The question was, are you ready, and what assurances and commitments are you giving us as Kenyans as far as your readiness is concerned? The answer to that question, yes, it is an emphatic yes, that we are ready. Evidenced by the development of our strategic plan, we know where we are going for the next 5 years. We also have election operation plan in place. Election operation plan is just to manage the general election, is a 2-year plan. And we also have a boundary review operation plan in place because we intend to do the boundary review ending 2023-2024 financial year. Allow me also to say that we are committed as a commission to safeguard the security of not only the ballot, but the democracy and health of the people of Kenya. Given the COVID situation we are in, we have put in place mechanisms to ensure that the ballot is safe, democracy is safe, and the health of the people of Kenya is safe. The other issue raised was whether we are also going to engage and be close to and hear out people with disabilities in this country. This segment of the population is part and parcel of the stakeholders the electoral management body is going to engage because they are a very integral part of our stakeholders. So yes, PWDs and DPOs, organizations that deal with disability, people with disability in this country are also going to be roped in. Training of election officials is very integral in election management. And what we have is a pool of experienced election officials, 10-year experience in election management, and this cannot be taken for granted. These are people who are committed, and these are people who love this country because they are citizens of this country as well. The Commission and the Secretariat is working as body corporate, so there are no divisions there. We are moving as a unitary body to deliver fair and free elections for this country.
1 minute.
Yes, there is a responsibility for every Kenyan, regardless of the position they hold in society, to ensure that they are very responsible in what they say, in what they do, and in what they ask their followers to do. Because we need to safeguard this country as heritage given to us by the people who were here before us. Let's keep the fire burning. We call the women citizens of this country to come forth to act as early warning signalers. Because whenever women, something goes wrong in society, it is the woman who feels it first. And therefore we need to work with women. We need to call them to come forward to tender their candidature, not only as voters, but candidates. They also have to take advantage of the AGPO, because election is an economic affair for everybody. So women come forward and become service providers during election and benefit from this as well. Yes, we are committed to work with other stakeholders, because each one of us is a duty bearer in a perspective, in a particular area. And therefore, once everybody has delivered in their mandate, then this country will be secured and safe.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you. Of course, one aspect we have missed all, but which we'll take on board is aspects around the youth. So youth need to be actively engaged and must participate actively. Colleagues, join me in putting your hands together for the panel. I think very informative, very educative. Let's appreciate them as they come down. And over to the MC, we need a sanitized mic. She will announce the MC.
Okay, go away. I'm doing my work now. Go. I know how to do this.
Thank you so very much to each of our panelists. Another round of applause to each one of them, please. And thank you to all of you who are in the regions and who are listening in so keenly. I'll ask the panelists and the moderators, the moderator, to come back to the front and kindly take photos. For everyone else, panelists, moderator. Winnie, that would be you. Come to the front and take a photo. Thank you so much. Please do. For everyone else, we're going to take an hour's break. So it's now, let's see what time it is. It's now 10:30. We're going to take 1 hour's break. During this time, it will enable all of the regions to be able to go through the session that they didn't yesterday. So to each of the sessions, each of the regions, please go into your sessions. For everyone who is here with us physically, if you're in the room, this gives us an hour's break, and I think we've got some work to do and some things that we'll be doing, some activities. So enjoy your tea. We'll see you back in an hour, and with the regions, we'll patch back in an hour's time. Thank you.
Women from the national and county levels, young, old, minority and marginalized women, women with disabilities, women in the grassroots, wakati ni sasa, kauli ni moja, wote adada. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuungane pamoja, kauli mbiu moja, wakati ni sasa. Uchaguzi katika uongozi, wakati ni sasa. Vota dada katika uchaguzi, katika uongozi, wakati ni sasa. Vota dada, mama msilale, wakati wetu umefika, wanawake msilale. Vota dada, vijana msilale, wakati wetu umefika, Wakenya msilale. Vota dada, wilayani, mashinani, hapa mjini. Vota dada, wilayani, mashinani, hapa mjini. Vota dada, mama msilale, wakati wetu umefika, wanawake msilale. Vota dada, vijana msilale, wakati wetu